Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Today is a Sporting Blizzard podcast, and I'm joined by my father today, Mr. Tony Parrish. Can you say hi to everyone?
How's everybody doing tonight?
We're going to be doing weekly podcasts, me and him, father versus son. This should be very, very non-argumentative. We never argue, right?
Absolutely not, because I'm always right.
As you see how this is going to go. And today we're going to talk about the rookie quarterbacks. How their first game, we're talking about Malik Willis, Desmond Ritter, Matt Corral, Sam Howell, and Kenny Pickett. We're also recapping the Seahawks Steelers games because they're both our teams, so we both paid attention to that game more than the others. And we're going to kick it off by talking about Malik Willis, and I'm going to ask you, what did you think of Malik overall in this past game?
I thought he looked a little lost, to be honest. I thought that he obviously is physically gifted. I mean, just look at him, his explosion and everything. But his accuracy is pretty suspect. And he wasn't really reading his receivers very well. So I think that it's going to take time. He's a project. I don't know if you remember the other day I asked you if he was
Junior or senior?
A junior or a senior, and you said he was a 5-year. So he's going to be a project, but who knows what you can get with him.
But that was the sentiment when he was coming to the draft. No one said he should start day one. It was obvious. He needs to sit, he needs to learn, and he's in a good culture. Mike Vrabel is a very good coach. Tannehill, I don't know if I'd put him in the lead candidate, but he's a good, solid quarterback that can win you games. He's took them to the AFC Championship game in the playoffs before. He's a solid quarterback, and he's the perfect guy for Willis to learn under, because Ryan Tannehill moved to the quarterback position in college, so when he came to the NFL, he was a project as well. It took him some time, and he had some questionable coaching along the way, but eventually he got to the point he is today. Now, Willis has a much better natural athlete than Tannehill. I do think he has a lot of room to grow. He had some very flashy plays where he takes off for that touchdown when he ran it in. You saw his athletic ability on display, but he also had a couple misreads, and it was the last play of the game I noticed. He missed a read deep over, which I saw on Twitter, someone pointed out, and I'll probably edit it in here so you guys can see it too. He missed a read, and he then went scrambling. That was his last play of the game. The Titans took him out after that play, so I don't know if it was like, hey, you missed this, so we're kind of taking you out, or hey, you showed us enough. You're playing the second half. You're kind of maybe our future quarterback. So let's not have you take unnecessary hits, and we can continue playing you in other preseason games and continue working with you in training camp and practice every day throughout the season.
Well, I think really from what he did, it gives him some tape to look at and some coaching points. And that's really all you can ask, is to make sure that, you have enough where you can look at in real game experience and you can kind of coach him through some of the mistakes and highlight some of the things that he did well.
Oh, yeah. And I'm not saying he had a bad game. I'm not at all. I don't think he had the best game of the quarterbacks that were drafted this past year, but he was very fine. And he was playing arguably the most reps against a starter team. Because the Ravens played a lot more starters than I think the Lions did. Definitely more than Seahawks did. Definitely more than Washington did. And definitely more than Carolina did because they played later in games. He started. And Baltimore kind of is known for, we're going to play our starters early. But if you had to grade it on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you put his first game at?
I'd put him middle of the road at a 5. Like I said, he showed some splashes. You mentioned the rollout that he had, and like I told you, I thought that looked very Russell Wilson-esque, where he ran backwards, spun around, and then made for the corner. The only thing that he did that Russell Wilson doesn't really do is he made some contact with some people as well.
Yeah, that's something I noticed when he played college too. He's not afraid from contact, which I don't think you want in your franchise quarterback. You'd rather him get down, get out of bounds. But it's worked for guys like Big Ben, and Josh Allen's not afraid of contact, and it's working out pretty well for him. But I'd have to agree with you. It's a 5 out of 10. He showed flash, but ultimately he wasn't consistent enough for me to go, he had a very good game. He had a solid game in my opinion. So now let's go into Desmond Ritter, and you probably remember this. I was not high on Ritter at all entering the draft. I did not like him, and I think he needs a lot to work on, and he showed promise this game. This was probably some of his best throws I've seen him have, and I know he got drafted in the 3rd round, so he had some good college throws. But he actually threw guys open here a couple times, I noticed, and that was something you did not see on his college tape at all. So when
No,
go ahead.
No, I'm sorry about that. Well, that's one of the things that you and I spoke about the other day is that when I was listening to a lot of the talk about him coming out of the draft, he was accurate when he was hitting a spot, but he wasn't really throwing people open. And I did notice, and we pointed that out, that he was throwing some guys open. I actually really liked his game. If you remember, just by the things that I saw, I thought he had probably the most upside. Early upside, I guess, is what I would say, of any of the quarterbacks coming out. I really liked him coming out, and I really liked him in this game.
And he is arguably the most accomplished quarterback coming out of this class, just taking Cincinnati to the playoffs last year, which I don't believe in any other quarterback this past draft did. And the only real thing about him is they ran to Alabama. That Cincinnati team was really good. They had 9 players drafted from a group of 5 team. Like, that's insane. And he got to work with NFL guys every day in practice, so I'm sure that helped him out a lot. Plus, he's working in an offense that Arthur Smith kind of can mold his play around his quarterback because he plays similar style to Mariota. Mariota plays a similar style to Ryan Tannehill. It's kind of in line with those guys. The guys that they can take off, but they'll try and stay in the pocket and find someone. They'll have some missed throws every now and then, but overall, you know what you get each and every snap.
That's one thing I did put in my notes, that Ritter is Mariota. If you put different jerseys on both of them with no names and you just watch them from afar, they throw the same, they run the same, they almost stand the same. They're both long, lanky runners with some explosion. Like I said, I really liked it. And the irony of that is I wasn't a fan of Mariota when he came out.
Yeah. I think it's because Mariota was the number 2 overall pick. I don't think you would have been as down on him if he was like lower first, second, because that's kind of where Ritter was spotted at. I mean, there was talk that, hey, he could go first round, but as we saw, there was only one quarterback that won the first round. So kind of where he was drafted, that's kind of our perception. Like, yeah, that kind of works for him. With Mariota, it's like, second overall pick, that's a lot he has to live up to. And he didn't.
Definitely. And, he didn't have a lot of early on help. So
they had how many different offense coordinators there?
Way too many. This goes with the old saying, though, that, when you're drafted first overall or second overall, you're going to one of the worst teams in the NFL. And that causes a lot of issues, with your legacy, if you will, because the team sucks and you're expected as a rookie to pick it up and, make it into a gangbuster. And that's just not realistic.
No. And in recent years, we've seen guys who are drafted later have more immediate success. I mean, Lamar Jackson was drafted by the Ravens late in the first round, drafted by a very good team. So he's going to have the most success out of the gate because that team was already playoff caliber without him. Then you look at a guy like Baker Mayfield, who went to an 0-16 team, or Sam Darnold, who went to was the Jets a 2 or 3 win team that year? They were not good.
And haven't been good since.
Yeah, that's a whole other story with the Jets and everything. But when you're drafted high, in recent years, the only 2 quarterbacks that, off the top of my head, that got drafted high and have taken their team to new heights have been Josh Allen and Joe Burrow. You can argue Kyler Murray, but he still is yet to win a playoff game, which is why I won't throw him in that category just yet.
Yeah, I'd have to say you're right on the quarterbacks that you named. I think that, once again, though, the teams and the GMs were smart enough to put pieces around them to where they were able to utilize their talents. I mean, if you remember, Burrow, before he got hurt his rookie season, he wasn't throwing the ball very deep. He was, basically doing a lot of checkdowns, and he was getting a lot of yards from it. But, I mean, it was really just, checking down, getting the ball out really quick. And, Josh, his first season, he showed a lot of flash, a lot of upside, but, I mean, he couldn't hit water if he threw it from a boat. So,
but it'd be a very big splash if it did.
Yes, it would. That guy's got a cannon for an arm.
Yeah. Yep. Now to move on. Oh, wait. real quick, I almost forgot. What was your grade on Ritter's game out of 10?
I'd give Ritter a 7. Like I had said, I thought he had really good plays. His wide receivers didn't do him any favors, but I don't think the wide receivers for Atlanta are going to do anybody many favors this year. And the mistakes that he made were mistakes that most quarterbacks will make. You get hit in the pocket and, you throw a wobbler or whatever else. The only mistake that he really made that I saw was the one where he threw it behind the wide out and it got picked. Fortunately for him, he got smacked pretty good, and so it got negated.
See, I don't know if that's fortunate. I don't know if I'd want to get hit by an NFL linebacker to avoid a pick. But I'm not a psychopath that's playing quarterback in the NFL. I'd agree with you. I'd say 7 out of 10, 6 out of 10, somewhere in that range. I'll probably go 6.5, just go in between. He showed promise. He showed that he has the tools to at least develop into a starting quarterback, like maybe a Mariota, like a Teddy Bridgewater perhaps. But there's still room to grow there for him as well. Now let's talk about Sam Howell, who he kind of was... He had the flash, he had all that, but I was scratching my head on a couple of plays he had. I thought he showed a lot of promise, don't get me wrong. He had some plays that made me think, this is Sam Howell I was so excited about to watch last year in college football. Then he had this, I saw the Sam Howell that played college football last year, and I was like, no, stop. Stop holding the ball for so long. Stop just chucking it deep, or just throw to your check down, because he missed, I think, 2 check downs. I was like, he's wide open. Instead, he chucks it deep, incomplete into coverage, which is what he did last year in college football, and it annoyed me. Because this was a guy, if you told me, we go backwards to a year, I would have told you Sam Howell's the first overall pick next year. I loved him so much his first 2 years in college. I thought he was going to be amazing. I thought he was going to win the Heisman. He was my guy, and I watched last year, and he did not show it to me that he was that. He fell the 5th round. I was excited to see how he would play, and I saw the flashes that I saw his first 2 years, but I saw the bad stuff, and the bad stuff really turned me off on him this past game. What were your thoughts on him?
Well, one of the first things that I wrote down was that he needs to read pressure better, and I think that's one of the things. Actually, I put on here, Howell's a baller, and I didn't know much about him at all. He moves well out of the pocket. He's big and he's strong. There were a couple times where he got hit pretty good, but he kept on going, and he actually turned nothing into something. He made some really nice throws. You're right. He does have some misreads, but once again, I think that's just, moving into, you got to remember the system he came out of. It's not a pro style offense. So the learning curve for him is a little more significant than, some of the other quarterbacks coming out, like your Pickett's or whatever.
And here's the thing. He plays a lot like the quarterback that's starting in Washington, Carson Wentz. They have a very similar play style. Big, can't have an arm, going to miss some reads, and you're going to have to pray because turnovers are going to happen. You just got to hope that you don't kill you beforehand. But how would you grade Howell's performance?
I'd give him a 6.5, maybe a 7. Like I said, I thought that he hung in there really good, and he made some good throws. So, I actually liked his game more than I liked Corral's game, and I like Corral better. So,
I'll agree with you on that, and we'll talk about Corral in a second. So when I look at how I thought he had a worse game than Willis, so I'm going to have to knock him below 5. I'm going to put him at 4.5. I think Willis had a better game, so I'm strictly grading it on how I have everyone. He did show the promise. He did have a couple throws that made you go, wow, he's an NFL quarterback, but he also had a lot of issues. And if I'm going to compare that, I said the same thing about Willis. The difference is Willis played against higher level players than Howell did. So that's why I'm going to grade him a little lower, because I'm grading on a curve, and overall, as much as I do hope Howell succeeds, so like that Howell fan of me that watched him his first 2 years can see him succeed and be like, I was right all along, I just have my doubts right now. But let's get into Matt Corral. And if anyone's listening to this wants to know more about Matt Corral, I upload a video on him about why he's possibly Matt Rule's last chance to save his job. If he plays like this, he ain't saving anyone's job.
Especially his own.
Yeah. He got destroyed. That line did not block. He had a rough game. And he was with the third stringers, which, yeah, you can say he didn't have the help. But there were some plays, like, he held on the ball long a couple times. Like, as soon as he had a little bit of protection, he was holding on to that ball as long as possible. He didn't throw it away, which you watched him, you're like, you should have thrown it away there. You should have thrown it away there. Or he has the, I'm just going to run with it. The difference is, then, like, you look at a Ritter or Willis running, Corral's not built like them. His frame is not going to take those hits. But I just want to talk about one play in particular, and you texted me, I wonder what your thought's going to be on this play. Corral got Kirkwood murdered. He led him into the DB. The DB just destroyed him. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when you go to the film study the next day or whenever they're doing it, you're going to get yelled at for that.
Yes, but once again, you and I have this discussion all the time. It really depends upon what the read was supposed to be. Did the receiver misread it? Was he supposed to cut up more on the throw instead of, narrowing out how he was doing or what? I mean, we don't know. When we get into the Seahawks game, we'll talk about one of those plays. But a lot of times we don't know what the receiver was supposed to do. And quarterbacks are always to blame for, incompletions that didn't hit the receiver's hand or, interceptions or whatever else. And a lot of times the quarterback takes the heat for it willingly, but it wasn't their fault. So I thought the same thing. And that's one of the reasons why I asked you. It looked like he got him killed, but it'll still be interesting. And they didn't say on their post game on that particular play. So I'm not sure if it was a quarterback mistake or a receiver mistake, but either way, it wasn't very good.
No.
And the O-line didn't do, out of all of the quarterbacks that played, the rookie quarterbacks that played, his O-line play was by far the worst. His time of, the time he had in the pocket, basically, it was just closing around on him, and he didn't have much time. So, he had a poor grade as far as I'm concerned. I would have given him probably a 3 to a 4.
I'd agree with you there.
But in that same respect, I would have liked to have seen it if the line held up a little bit more to see what he could do, because basically he was just trying to get rid of the ball. He got taken down more. He got hit more than anybody else, and he wasn't holding on to the ball that long. So that just shows you that the guys that are going to be plumbers and contractors and everything else for him didn't do much work.
I was timing that last drive when I was watching live. I watched this game twice. I went back to take notes and everything. But watching it live, that last drive, I had to get out my I grabbed my phone and I went to my timer settings and I was just doing the stopwatch. I'm like, 1.9, 1.9, 1.9, 1.6 until he was getting pressured. As soon as they snapped the ball, it felt like there was a defensive end or defensive tackle. Safety, the coach, didn't matter who. There was a Washington player in his face.
That's why I say that's tough to judge him. How fair is that when he's taking the snap and on a 3-step drop or a 5-step drop, there's already somebody in the backfield with him. You can't be a competent quarterback like that.
No, it's close to impossible. Like, we've seen good quarterbacks struggle with bad lines. You just look at the guy in front of him, Baker Mayfield. See the difference when he had a good O-line compared to when he had a bad O-line in Cleveland. It's night and day. Give Brady a bad O-line, he's going to struggle. You're going to give any quarterback a bad O-line, they're going to struggle. It's just the name of the game. You win football games in the trenches, and that's something Carolina needs to work on. Now, these are the backups, so it's hard to say, like, oh, they didn't improve in the past offseason, because I do believe they improved. They got Bradley Bozeman. They got Ika Mekwonu. Don't know, I was blinking on his name there for a second. But you have guys there. They brought in Austin Corbett. They've tried to improve it, so that's the big thing. If we can see Corral work with maybe the second stringers, the guys who may have a shot at making the NFL roster, we can maybe get a better judgment of him. But as you said, I think when you grade his game, you got to do it a 3 because he by far had the worst out of the rookie quarterbacks. But now we're going to get into Seahawks Steelers, and we'll talk about Kenny Pickett in this because this game we're recapping. He played the entire second half. So what was your biggest takeaway from watching the first half of the game? Before we get to the Locke and Pickett, like we got Mitch, Gino, and Mason. Watching those three, who do you think played the best and why?
Mitch. And ironically, when you looked at his stats and everything else, I was like, God, I thought he did a lot better than that. But honestly, he led the offense really well. And I thought he showed a lot of poise. That one inside blitz by Darrell Taylor that he just bounced off of Mitch, and Mitch ran it out, and he got some yards. Like I said, I thought that he showed a lot of moxie and promise. And as far as I'm concerned, even though the stats don't show it, I think that he actually performed better than any of the other quarterbacks.
I'd agree with you there. There were a couple plays that I didn't like on that Steelers offense when he was in there. Most notably, the second play of the game, Kendrick Green, who is battling to be the starting left guard, got absolutely destroyed and left Trubisky game killed. He threw it high to, I believe it was Kevin Rader, an incomplete pass. That's not what you want to see with Mitch. This is a guy you need to build his confidence up. He had some issues in not Detroit, Chicago with Matt Nagy. He went to Buffalo. He had a year rehabbing with Brian Daboll. You need to get his confidence going because as much as you can say it's a talent game in the NFL, well, you also need some confidence because if you're questioning if you can make a throw, guess what? You're getting hit. If you're questioning you can get away from someone, you're getting hit. Football is a very fast-paced game. You cannot doubt yourself. So that'd be my concern with Mitch this year is if the O-line keeps on letting him get hit like that, he's going to have doubt, and it's going to lead to some bad issues.
Well, is that the starting offensive line for Pittsburgh? I guess I don't know.
So it was the starting offensive line, potentially. Green is in a battle with Kevin Dotson to be a starter, and Kevin Dotson was out. He did not play this past game. I believe he's going to play Saturday night against the Jacksonville Jaguars. But if Green's your starter, you need to see him play better. Like, he had, I think it was 3 pressures that he just got beat, and the other guard, James Daniel, had a pretty bad one as well. You just need to have better offensive line protection. I thought the tackles did good, minus Dan Moore getting just destroyed by Boy Mafe to get that strip sack on Mason. But I thought the rest of the linemen did good. I thought Mason Cole was a breath of fresh air in the running attack. The past couple seasons, I'm a big Pouncey fan. He was not that good at the end of his career. He struggled. He wasn't as mobile. He wasn't as strong. Injuries caught up to him. And last year, Kendrick Green he was not a center, and J.C. Hausner was not that good. Mason Cole was a breath of fresh air, and watching him in the rushing attack, just watching him block, you could tell he's an immediate upgrade. Thoughts on the Seahawks starting offense line, and mainly your first-round pick, Cross.
Well, I was really, really happy with the offensive line, how it played. I think Cross is going to be quietly just one of those strong offensive linemen that won't get as much notoriety. I don't think he'll be, like top 1 or 2 in the league at any time soon. He is just going to be that do a great job. I mean, he didn't allow any pressures. And his run blocking was really good, considering he's coming from where he came from, and they don't teach run blocking there. I thought he did really well. Abe Lucas shocked the ever-loving blank out of me. We talked about the pancake blocks today where he picked up number 50 and kind of just planted him to the ground. And that's something that I was really worried about because just like with Cross, the offense that Washington State runs is not conducive to, getting in that 3-point stance and run blocking. And I thought that he's an aggressive beast. He really has embraced trying to block in the running game. and I was really impressed. The guard play was good. The center play, I think Blythe is still better than what Seattle's had in the past with Posick. Do I think that he is the future? Definitely not. They really need to look at maybe next year addressing center in the draft. But I think he's going to at least help this offensive line mesh together the way that Seattle's new offensive scheme needs to go.
Okay, out of the guys in the first half, who impressed you the most on Seattle's team?
Are you talking offensive line or offense or
Just
defense?
in general,
Or just
played in the first half, who impressed you the most on Seattle's team?
Ooh, that's a tough question because I was really happy with quite a few of the players. I would probably say the offensive line in general impressed me. There were some splash plays. One of the players that, when we were talking about players to watch, this guy wasn't even on my radar, but Vi Jones, 225-pound linebacker, but he had 5 tackles. He had that sack in the first half. So I mean, he did good. Oh, actually, no, it was the sack in the second half because that was against Pickett, but he played quite a bit of the game.
Yeah, the one guy I was really impressed with Seattle in the first half was Travis Homer. And I know we talked about this and you're not the biggest Homer fan, and he was wide open a lot. Like, there was some missed coverages. But, man, sometimes just good to be wide open and get those plays. And he had a couple really nice runs, I thought, too. And to flip it to the Steelers side, the guy who impressed me the most on the Steelers side in the first half was George Pickens. And it's kind of hard for me to say anyone else because I'm really excited for him. If you want me to give you a different one, it would be Gunnar Olensky, the other wide receiver who scored the first touchdown. I look at this receiving core, and it just gives me hope that when Pickett does come in, he's got the talent around him. Because that's a big thing. Like, you look at Detroit, like, let's say they drafted someone in the first round this past year. He has no one to throw to. Pittsburgh, you got guys to throw to. You got Deontay Johnson. You have Gunnar Olensky, hopefully. You have George Pickens, hopefully. You have Chase Claypool. Calvin Austin, who didn't play due to a Liz Frank injury, which made me sad because I heard he was doing great. I heard he's just beyond fast, has good hands. And this is the guy that actually gave Sauce Gardner trouble in college, which Sauce had trouble with practically nobody in college. I have hope for the young receiving core, and just George Pickens and Gunnar Olensky kind of reinforced that for me.
Well, actually, I don't really have a problem with Travis Homer. I just think that he's overrated for what Seattle uses him for. Their coaching staff thinks that he is the third down blocking king, and I had seen him let the defense through several times and get Russ smacked around. So he always plays well and he runs well, and he's actually gotten faster. He's a great receiving back, but it seems like he's gotten a little faster. It's pretty impressive the way he was actually running off the tackles and things. Your grade on Pickens is a little higher than my grade on him. He's a beast. He's a fantastic talent. I would definitely give your guys' best player to Gunnar. And one of the reasons why I brought this up to you, and then I was also noticing earlier this morning when I was watching the game again. So he had the touchdown play when he was going against Kobe Bryant. He pushed off, arm extended, pushed off.
Oh, Pickens. Oh, I was so confused there. I
Pickens.
thought you were talking about Gunnar still. I'm like,
no,
what?
Gunnar was just awesome. He
was open.
Gunnar reminded me of Edelman. He was just always open, or Wes Welker, where they're just always open.
And he comes from?
Yeah, you had mentioned that he came from that coach or that team, the Patriots.
They know how to find white guys that can play football.
Yes, they do. But Pickens also pushed off about a minute 30 in on the play against Woolen, where he just ran down, extended his arm, pushed, and came back and got the ball.
Was that the sideline catch?
That was the sideline catch. So he played well, but, they made a pretty concerted effort last year to get the wide receivers to stop pushing off like that. And you remember, if the referees see the arm extended, that's when they're going to get him. And he extends his arm pretty bad. So he's not going to get the calls against him, against rookies in the preseason. But when he's going up against some of the other guys that you're going to be going up against, especially in that division, he's not going to get the calls.
No, I think Pickens is a talent, and you actually said this. He doesn't need to push off because he is good. Like, this is not a dude that needs to push off, that needs to shove people to get open. He has the hip movement. He has the athleticism to get open. And as we saw, he has some pretty good hands as well.
Oh, he's absolutely a great talent. And he's probably a steal where they got him. So it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the season plays out for him. But he's definitely a weapon for the Steelers.
Yeah. There's one other guy I want to highlight for the Steelers, and he didn't play a whole bunch, but man, when he did, I swear he was the best player on the field, Miles Jack. And I know you love Miles Jack probably more than me, which is sad because he's now on my favorite team. But that third down tackle for a loss, he just blew it up. There was no one able to touch him. And then you have Edmonds and Wallace coming in to help out a bit at the end. But looking at that explosiveness from the Steelers, have we seen a guy at the linebacker position that good since they've lost Ryan Shazier?
Well, I don't think that you can compare Jack and Shazier, their talent. I think Shazier is probably faster, but I think overall, I personally like Jack better. If you remember, I cried. I was in a fetal position when Seattle didn't get him in the draft.
Jermaine Ifedi.
Because they had the opportunity. And then when he was released, I cried, and I was back once again in the fetal position when he got picked up by a team other than Seattle, who really could use another inside backer to go along with Jordan Brooks. So, and this, for what they paid for him, that's almost like highway robbery.
Well, I mean, he probably just wanted to go to stable coaching staff at that point after dealing with Urban Meyer last year. Was like, who's stable? Steelers. Yeah, I'll go there. Sure. Just pretty much anyone but Urban at that point.
Well, he also probably realizes that their front guys are going to be able to take on blocks enough to where he's going to actually just be able to make plays.
Yeah. Let alone you got TJ Watt on the, like right beside you. Like, if they're going to send you as a free blitzer, they're not going to pay as close attention to you as they have to with TJ.
Definitely not.
And especially with Brian Flores now coming over, who does run a lot of linebacker blitzes, as he does get the free man. As we kind of saw that a little later on in the second half, which we're going to switch to. What were your thoughts on Kenny Pickett?
I thought he played pretty well. It's really tough to judge against guys that really aren't going to be making the rosters. But, I mean, he was accurate. He stood in the pocket. Sometimes he stood in the pocket a little too long, but, I mean, he's a rookie. So I didn't see where the, notorious hand size was an issue for him at all. I mean, he got popped a couple times pretty good and the ball stayed in his hands. So
there was something about that. It was after the draft, or it was Louis Riddick, I believe. I can't remember exactly what he said, but it's how his hands are jointed that he's able to actually get more of his hand around the football than someone with a bigger hand would. I'll have to send it to you later. I can't remember the exact thing, but it was how his fingers are jointed. He's able to extend them around the football really good. But I think it's kind of easy to say who was the best Steeler in the second half, and that would be Jeff Warren.
Number 30, right? Your rookie?
Yep. The rookie running back, because he was running as a bowling ball on wheels.
He's got a good jump cut, too, and I don't think that anybody expected him to be doing that. I mean, the first couple plays, he hit the hole and he drove, and then after that, he he was cutting. I actually told you in a text or on the phone, I can't remember what, that I really thought that he needs to get some first and second string reps, because it'd be interesting to see once again what he can do against the people that are going to be playing on Sundays, because I really liked him as well. And you know me, I love running backs. Wide receivers are fancy toys. Running backs are just what makes the league go, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, there's three things I want to highlight on Warren. Number one, the fumble. You can't have that, and I believe it was Tomlin or maybe the RB coach. He has to carry a football around everywhere in practice right now. Everywhere on campus right now. If he loses the football, he's fined $100. So he has to carry that football everywhere. So they're working on him with that. Number two, I think he has the potential to make the team, and he's going to have the shot against starters because he was getting first-team reps yesterday. So which makes you think Benny Snell, I believe, is still out. Anthony Mcfarland, he did play good in the first half. I'm not going to say he had a bad game. But he's not what the Steelers are. The Steelers are the team that's going to punch you in the mouth. They're going to come back, punch you in the mouth, and the third time they're going to punch you in the mouth. If you're not knocked out then they're going to hit you again as hard as they can. And the third thing, do you know who Jeff Warren's related
to? Chris Warren?
Okay, I can't confirm or deny that. No, he is the cousin of former Steelers running back and two-time Super Bowl champion Willie Parker, who is notable for having the longest Super Bowl run against the Seattle Seahawks, and his little cousin just had his first preseason action against the Seattle Seahawks.
And he did pretty well.
Yes. Not saying he's going to start like Willie did, because I don't think he's getting over Najee minus an injury, but he showed a lot of promise, I feel, and he's a UDFA that I can see making a team.
That's just crazy that he was a UDA, because he had some really good flashes.
I think it's because he only had one real year of production at Oklahoma State, because he transferred from, I believe it was Utah State, because he started his college career at a JUCO because no one offered him anything. Then went to school in Utah, then went to Oklahoma State. It's like, this is a dude that has worked hard to get in the league, and it's cool to see if he can make it. Now, there's one Seahawk I want to talk about, because this guy was just amazing. I felt like watching this game. He felt like the Seahawks have their next pass rusher, Boye Mafe. This dude's first step is wicked. I saw him just run by Dan Moore. Dan Moore, who's been left one-on-one with Myles Garrett, and I haven't seen Myles Garrett beat him that bad. He destroyed Dan Moore, ripped the ball out of Rudolph's hands, nearly got a turnover. The Steelers fall back on it. But then I want to go, fourth down, Kenny Pickett on a rollout. Kenny Pickett's not the fastest quarterback you're going to see in the NFL, but he's got some legs. He can move. Mafe chases him down, recognizes the play, and sacks him. Then we'll talk about in a second what happened on the next play.
So Mafe is a physical, I mean, he's strong, he's fast. Brian Baldinger actually says he's got amazingly heavy hands, which means his punch for his power moves takes people off guard and it helps him get by them. So he had some really, really big splash plays. Sadly, he did miss a couple tackles. He needs to really work on his coverage because he dropped in coverage a couple times and wasn't really good. But overall, I mean, coming into it, we knew that he was raw. And I think that Clint is going to be able to mold him into a pretty darn good outside linebacker. So I'm excited about it. He did have a lot of flash. And the thing is he's not going to be starting. So he's just going to be coming in at those points where all he has to do is go after the quarterback, where he can just pin his ears back and go in and see what he can get done. And I think that at least early on, I think that's going to be good for him for his development. So I'll be pretty excited to see how he plays this year.
Yeah, and the other thing to note is the Seahawks play Denver week 1. Boye Mafe was drafted with one of the picks that they got in the Russell Wilson trade. Can you see Mafe getting a sack on Wilson, kind of going like, hey, you could have had me. You got this franchise quarterback instead, which I understand, but you could have had me.
Yeah, honestly, I could see him getting a sack on Wilson. We can get into the Seattle Denver game at another time. I've got some interesting thoughts on how that game might go, but yeah, he definitely has the potential to rush from the outside and get a sack.
Okay, there's one last guy we have to talk about because, well, he was going to start this week, but now has COVID. That'd be Drew Locke. I'll give you the floor because you're the Seahawks fan, so you paid a lot more attention to him than I probably did. How'd you think of Drew Locke?
You know, it's funny. So I watched the practices and they had the scrimmage game, and then I watched this. And, I mean, his and Geno's numbers were pretty similar. I think he was 11 of 15, and Geno was 10 of 15. Geno did have a couple of drops. So, who knows about that? Geno had the rushing touchdown. But I know what Seattle has in Geno. And I watched it last year. And I know that I really like what we could potentially have with Locke better. He's going to make some mistakes that Geno wouldn't make. But in that same respect, he's going to push the field and he's going to push the envelope harder than Geno will. And with Seattle focusing more on a running game this year, I think that they're really going to need to, push the ball down the field more when they take those opportunities so that you can back the safeties off so they're not crowding the blocks. Because we all know when you have 9 in the box, only Derrick Henry's getting through that. So I'm really hoping that Locke does win it. Ironically, one of the things that everybody's giving him grief on for this game was the fumble. And yes, he misread it. Initially, when I looked at the play, I thought the running back should have chipped before he came back in, but the assignment was called that it was his. And so that was his. But if you'll remember last year in overtime, Geno fumbled. And that game really counted because it was regular season. Stadium. Yes, exactly, in the same stadium.
Different
and
names,
that
though.
one counted. Yes.
Different stadium names, though. That play, I was really happy with Mark Robinson on that play, the linebacker that got the strip sack. Mark Robinson's new to linebacker position. He is more recently a running back. So that's a running back playing linebacker. And we saw someone here in Montana State play that some college. We saw him develop into a pretty good linebacker. So I have hopes for Robinson, but he's still developmental. And because I'm going to finish this off real quick, talking about Kenny Pickett. And Kenny Pickett's the hope of my franchise right now. You're not winning a Super Bowl without a quarterback. You need a quarterback. It's the most important position. With what I saw from this game gave me hope that he can continue to build off it. He had some reps with the 1s yesterday. He's mainly been working with the 2s instead of the 3s. So that gives me hope that, hey, he's going to get some more meaningful action against actual NFL players instead of guys who won't be making the team. They may be playing in Canada or some league over in Europe. I'd like to see Pickett get those reps before I can say, yeah, he's a home run draft pick. Because the bias side of me, if I'm Graham, I want to say he's a 10 out of 10. But there's a realism side of me that's like, it's a 7 or 6. Because this was not against NFL players. He had a couple on the field. Mafe on the field's an NFL player. Mafe's a beast. But they're not against guys who you can conceivably say, yeah, he's going to start on any given Sunday. Or, yeah, if he's hurt, we have no problem playing him because we think he's that good. You didn't see any of those guys out there, really. So, as excited I am on Pickett, I did see the issues, and he did hold the ball too long. That was something today from, I believe I saw from Brooks Pryor, She tweeted out that Kenny was holding on the ball too long, and Tomlin was yelling, "Throw it, Kenny, throw it!" Like,
Well, I don't think that he should really be penalized for playing against the people that he was playing against, because let's face it, he beat them, right?
oh yeah.
So, I mean,
That last drive was really good. That was a good ball to Tyler Vaughn on the outside that Vaughn took for a touchdown. Bad tackling, yeah, but it was still a good throw in the right read at that spot in the game.
I think that basically, if he's going to be your franchise, I think you guys are in good shape. Pittsburgh has always been a team that revolves around defense. They like the running game. And he's going to be able to make the throws you need to make. You don't have, this is the argument that you and I always have. You don't have to have the number one overall drafted quarterback. You need to have a quarterback that works well in the system, can make the throws that he needs to make, and get the job done. And that way, I think you'll have a more balanced team. And when your quarterback isn't the overall superstar and you're devoting so much money to him that you don't have a team other than that, AKA what Seattle's had to go through the last couple of years, when he goes down, you've got nothing. The cupboard is bare. And so I think Pickett is going to be that guy that is really, really talented and really good, but he's not going to be ever considered a top 5 or even a top 10. But he'll probably be around that 11 to 15 range. And you can win a Super Bowl with a guy like that.
With what you're hoping for is he's Derek Carr. That's what you're hoping he is.
Well, and you and I both have different opinions on Carr as well.
I'm turning around a bit on Carr. I thought he had a very good year last year. We can get into that later day because I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about the AFC West during the season. But
most definitely.
My thoughts with Pickett are with what we kind of just talked about earlier. Landing spot matters. The Steelers are a stable organization. They've had how many losing records since I was born? Like 2? They've almost had as many losing records as Seattle Mariners have playoff appearances since I've been born.
That's harsh.
But true. And the Mariners may tie them this year.
Let's not go down that road.
Yeah, it's football. No one cares about baseball. My bad. But landing spot matters. Do I think Pickett should start week 1? Based off what I saw from Mitch, no. Can I see Pickett playing this year? Yeah, I do. I do think there'll be games that you can maybe be like, well, it's later in the year. We're not going to the playoffs. Why not throw him out there? Let's see what we have in him. Let's get him some games against starters. So like the offseason, we know we have to work on. But here's the thing. If Kenny Pickett's not starting any football games this year, that's a good thing for the Steelers. Because that means Mitch Trubisky's doing a good job and they're contending for the playoffs. Which at the end of the day is the goal. The goal is to get to the playoffs and hope magic happens.
Well, and I think if the Steelers' offensive line holds up and Canada can kind of use some, sleight of hand magic.
Actually, hang on. That's one thing I almost forgot to talk about. Matt Canada did not get to run his offense last year. I'm a Ben Roethlisberger fan. I grew up with him. He was the quarterback of my team. I grew up watching him. He irritated me last year because I was watching him like, this is not Matt Canada's offense. We didn't see much of Matt Canada's offense with Pickett. We didn't see much of it with Rudolph. I mean, not Pickett, with Trubisky. We didn't see much of it with Rudolph. We saw a lot of it with Pickett. We saw the motion. We saw a lot of that magic that Canada likes to do. And here's the thing. Canada was one of the guys who was originally recruiting Pickett to Pittsburgh. Till he went to LSU. Canada was on the Pittsburgh Panthers, and he was recruiting that guy. So he knows how Pickett plays better than a lot of people. But as you're saying with, want to see how Canada does?
Well, I just think that I think this year will be interesting to see. In the preseason, you're not going to see a lot of motion because everything's vanilla, right? So it'll be interesting to see what happens when it actually does come about, because what I think will end up happening is the offensive line won't be tasked as hard just to hold up. You'll do a little more stunts, running, counters and things like that. And that'll help the offensive line to where they're not just getting pushed back into the quarterback as much. And I think if that happens, your defense isn't going to be out as much as it was last year because you guys were on the defensive side taxed pretty hard last year.
You saw a lot of injuries. A lot of injuries.
You saw a lot of injuries, and when those big boys get gassed, man, they can't push off as much, which means that they're going to get gashed for the run. And Pittsburgh was not that great against the run last year.
Horrible. And here's the thing to add, though, too. They were bad against the run because their starting nose tackle, who is a big part of their rush defense, destroyed his ankle week 2. Like, that's a big thing. Having him back is going to be huge in Tyson Alualu. But you're right. The Steelers are a defensive-first team. It's kind of how their brand is. Like, you look at Green Bay, their brand is franchise quarterbacks. New England, it's do your job. Miami, it's kind of just we go with the flow. It's whatever's hot. Or in Dallas, it's flashy. Pittsburgh, it's we're going to pound you into the ground until you're pink mist.
Ironically, that's Baltimore too.
And that's what makes it the perfect sibling rivalry of I hate you, but I respect you, but I still hate you.
Couple things just before we end this. I don't know how much longer you have on this, but Seattle's tight ends did not play very well. Neither Colby Parkinson nor Fant. Fant caught the ball a couple times. Yeah, he messed up that one on the sideline. That's not where I'm upset with him about. I'm more upset with the fact that he doesn't block on that first wide receiver run that they did. He basically did
he played patty cake with Witherspoon, and Witherspoon won.
He olayed him, he turned, and it was a turnstile and let the guy through. And then he had one just a little while later, the same thing, where he basically turns and lets the guy through, and you can't have that. Everybody knows that the tackling was really, really poor. I found out that Seattle hasn't been doing much tackling in practice.
Well, that would do it.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why is because the coaching staff was trying to keep everybody fresh and uninjured. And so I'm really, really hoping that this week, even though it was a short week, that they put a little more emphasis on tackling. And we'll see.
Knowing Pete, he was probably yelling at them the next day.
He's not really like that. He's more of the teacher. So, he'll basically tell them, hey, you guys screwed up and everything else. But I don't really think that so far as yelling at him. And he even said in his press conference this week that the tackling was abysmal, but it gives them some talking points, and it's preseason. So he's more worried about some of the other things. You know me, I'm a defensive guy. I want tackling. I want the hard hits. So
like we saw at the end of the game with Khalil Davis. I believe it was Khalil Davis. It was one of the Davis twins. Lit up that player.
Yeah.
There's one guy I want to highlight, though, before we wrap this up, and that's DJ Dallas. Because with how he played, he deserves having his name said. I felt like he was the best Seahawk that entire game. He was running hard. He was on the special teams. Like, I know he has played in the NFL before. I know he has NFL experience. But I was watching him, I'm like, man, this is a different DJ Dallas I've seen.
I honestly think that he's probably gotten a little bit better in his pass reads and everything else. But he's always just been really, really solid. He even started his rookie year a couple of times because, Carson got hurt, and he did well. He had games where he ran for over 100 yards. And the problem is he's not flashy. He wasn't flashy in this game either, but 10 rushes, 73 yards. And then he also, caught the ball a couple times. He had that really nice reception for a touchdown from Locke. And so he's not flashy. He's just a do your job guy, and he gets it done, and he makes the most of it. And to be quite honest, Travis Homer is a lot the same way. So they have, with between Homer and DJ Dallas, they've got some really good depth, but they're not going to give you what Penny can give you or what Walker can potentially give you.
Yeah, and the two of them are probably going to get more reps now with Walker having sports hernia surgery, I believe it is.
No, he does not have a sports hernia. He's got a hernia, but it's not a sports hernia.
Okay.
So
he'll be good for the season. It's not like a season ender or anything.
No, they're hoping that he'll be back for the first game, but within the first couple of games, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna be mad at someone being like, "Yeah, you have a hernia. You should play football." No. Take your time to heal that. I understand.
Suck it up, Buttercup. You're not bleeding.
The inside of it might be.
Yeah, but nobody can see that.
Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt more. Yeah, well, that's going to wrap it up today. We don't know exactly what we're going to talk about next week because we're just going to recap some games again. Ultimately, I do hope you all enjoy this. And remember, this will be going up Friday, not Thursday. This is a Friday upload, so we're not going to be talking about, obviously, Seahawks Bears. It just happened last night. Or the games that are about to happen. We'll talk about them next week, but I hope you all enjoyed. And as always, be safe.